Welcome back for another edition of Post Media's Ottawa Senators panel. I'm Ken Warren with TSN 1200's Ian Mendez, just to talk about what's going on once again with the Senators. They're coming into this current week after a loss against Calgary Flames. It's 4 in a row, Ian, and after they were on a little bit of a roll before this 4-game losing streak. How alarmed should we be? Is this what we might have expected? A little bit of a rough patch here.
It's a rough patch, but you look at big picture. I think you look back at November for a second, Ken. If I would have told you the Ottawa Senators would finish the month with 8 wins out of 16 games, I don't think you would have believed me. Remember, they went 3-7-1 in October. We thought they were going to be at the bottom of the standings. This was a great month for them. And it's really hard to do because I think in our industry, it's all about the immediacy of it. We have to look at the kind of 10,000 foot view of the Ottawa Senators at all times. And as you do that, they went 8-8 in November. So you're going to have some good stretches, some bad stretches. I think 8-8 is an unbelievable month, and ending it on 4 consecutive losses isn't ideal, but they're still trending in the right direction.
And a very tough schedule. I mean, they were in and out. They played a lot of road games, back-to-backs. They had a lot of stretches, uncomfortable games, and a young team. And that's where you kind of look at this and you say, young teams. And when we went into the year, everybody's saying, well, where are they going to get goals? That's what's happening right now. Where are they going to get goals? The power play is terrible, but it's a skill thing. And over time, if you draft well and you bring up these kids properly, you're going to get the skill going, and that's the long-term plan. I know what you're saying. It's like it's hard in the immediate to say, whoa, this team is struggling. But I think that these are the growing pains that fans should have expected maybe to happen here.
Yeah, I think so. And it's tough, right? Because they get shut out last week in Columbus, and then the next 3 games they play, they get 4 goals in total. Right. But that's what we thought was going to happen starting the season. If you looked at one area of this team, you thought, they just don't have top 6 talent. And I think you're seeing that come to fruition right now.
And if you look at this 4-game losing streak, the game in Minnesota, I was at the game in Minnesota, they were terrible. They did not play well. But, it is in a way a one-off. The other 3 games that they lost in that stretch, to Columbus, to Boston, and to Calgary on Saturday, they played okay. They could have won 1 or 2 of those for sure. But again, it gets back to the talent level and do they have enough? And I think maybe that leads into, okay, so Logan Brown didn't play Saturday, a guy a lot of hype about, a lot of excitement, potential first-line center long-term for this team. Do you agree with the move to take him out for a night?
I think it's really interesting. I think the explanation that was given is that we just wanted to get J.C. Beaudin back in the lineup. I think if you put a hooked up DJ Smith to a polygraph machine, I don't think he's passing it. I think we knew what this was, which was you're sending a message to a young player, which I think simultaneously they're trying to protect him. They're saying, we're trying to get Beaudin in.
Right.
But we've all seen this game long enough to know a 21-year-old kid should be able to play back-to-back games. That's not the issue. So to me, I think it's really interesting. And I wonder now as we get into December, are we at the point where Logan Brown is back to being on a game-by-game basis and could find himself back in the AHL?
Yeah, and when you're looking at long-term and big picture, you're not the building block is not J.C. Beaudin. No. It's Logan Brown is one of the pieces. But that's fine. And I mean, I think it was the 4th or the 5th goal. I lost track in Minnesota where he's trailing the play. He's not back-checking. It's the kind of stuff that young players tend to do at times when they get things are rolling and they forget the little parts of the game. And I think that's all it was. It's a little subtle message, and I don't think anybody should be too caught off guard. Hey, you want to send a message to a young guy that every night it's an every night league. Talking about every night league, Eric Brandstrom. Here's the young defenseman who came in the Mark Stone trade. I don't think occasionally you see a flash here or there, but boy, he hasn't done a whole lot here, and he's playing into the 10, 11 minutes. They're going to have to make a move here and send him down to Belleville and give him a chance to play down there.
I think so, and I think if they do that, I don't think we should jump on them and say that's the wrong move or that this guy's been a failure. I think Logan Brown's probably a great example of patience is the way to go, right? And Nick Paul is a great example of that. And then on the flip side, you see they kind of fast-track the Curtis Lazars of the world into the game. Eric Brandstrom right now, I think what's really disappointing, Ken, is when they made the trade at the deadline last year for Mark Stone, it was done under the guise of this guy's going to be dynamic, explosive, and kind of Erik Karlsson 2.0. And to date, I don't think we've seen that. It would be one thing if we saw the odd time that he was explosive and dynamic and had some creativity, but it's just we haven't seen that out of him, and I think you want to send him to the American Hockey League, let him dominate down there, come up here and maybe show some of that.
What surprises me, I thought if he was going to make errors or not be at this level. It would be like he's getting caught up ice. He's trying to do too much that way, that he's trying to make a play that might not be there yet. But we're just seeing him kind of be conservative in his own end and play, make the chip off the boards and occasionally battle in front of the net. And that's not really what he was hyped at. I don't think that's what and I think he's frustrated. I've talked to him quite a bit about it, and I'm trying. I can't get there. But maybe a little bit more room in the AHL might be the way to go here. And then the question is, if you do that, who do you replace him with? But that's why they're the GMs and the management. But maybe you take a step back and say, long term, we need to get this guy somewhere.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think at some point you make that decision sooner rather than later. Like there's no harm in sending him down for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Let him go down there and essentially, I'd like to see this guy dominate at some point and then have him come up to the National Hockey League.
So we're talking management moves, possibly, which leads to, the veterans maybe in their final years, unrestricted free agents, and when do you go into this mode of maybe trading some of these guys to get draft picks? I'm looking at this roster, and there might be some guys that can help teams that have injuries, maybe Tyler Ennis, maybe Ron Hainsey, Craig Anderson, who's, as we speak, injured, but he's supposed to be coming back soon. We got a chance to see Marcus Högberg, who's got a contract for next year in the NHL. Do you think this stuff's going to start to come before Christmas, or do you think maybe into the new year?
I think history has shown us, Ken, that it's usually into the new year. And it's interesting, right? Last couple of years, Pierre Dorion, certainly last year, was the most watched general manager at the trade deadline, and that was because of quality. I think he's going to be one of the most watched general managers this year because of quantity. And I think if you look at it, it was 14 guys on the roster as it stands right now are either UFAs or RFAs, and they don't have the star power. Last year it was Duchesne and Stone and Dzingel, and this year it's that sort of middle class of players. And what can you get for Tyler Ennis? What can you get for Vladimir Nemesnikov? What can you get for Chris Tierney? All these guys. Ron Hainsey's an interesting one. You brought up his name. I think the cap hit on Ron Hainsey makes it really hard.
Maybe later rather than
maybe
earlier,
later.
right?
But if you're a Stanley Cup contender, and I know Ron won a Stanley Cup with Pittsburgh in 2017, but if you're a Stanley Cup contender and you're looking at Ron Hainsey to come in as your sixth guy, are you looking at $3.5 million? You're probably up against the cap. So maybe they have to eat a little bit of salary on Ron Hainsey, but it's going to be interesting. But I think we wait till after Christmas to see some of these moves go down.
And I know we've talked about this on this show for several weeks about JG Pajot, but we talked about the month, and the month was 8-8, which is overall a good month. It ended a bit sour. Pajot ends the month with 11 goals. Where did JG Pajot come from to be an offensive star? I think this is going to go right to the trade deadline. They're going to re-sign this guy. He's in a really, really enviable position as an unrestricted free agent. Do you keep him here as your local, consistent, two-way checking guy, but you're going to have to pay him to keep him there? Or is he the kind of guy that goes to a Stanley Cup contender and you get the big package back? I'm really going to be intrigued by what happens with Pajot here in the next couple months.
I think JG Pajot, Ken, is the most interesting case because you talk to Ottawa fans. Okay, one thing they agree on is he's universally loved.
Right.
The one thing they can't agree on is what do you do with him? And I think it's going to be really interesting because I think you can make a compelling argument for both. But I'll say this. If your plan is to be a Stanley Cup contender 3 years from now, you got to ask yourself, what is the best decision for us to make to put us in a spot to be a Stanley Cup contender in 3 years? And it might be trading JG Pajot. If you use the Derek Brassard return as a benchmark, you got a first, you got a third, and you got a blue chip goalie prospect in Philip Gustafsson in 2018. Maybe, just maybe, that's what you can get back for JG Pajot.
And before we wrap up here, this is a Senators panel, of course, but they were in Calgary on the weekend. What a week for the Calgary Flames with everything that happened and ultimately Bill Peters' resignation. But it's opened the doors to so much conversation about the state of hockey and what's happening within dressing rooms, what's happening with fan reactions to players. Both of us talked with Mark Borfietsky quite a bit and to DJ Smith quite a bit about where the game is going. Is hockey trailing society in a way? And is this a thing that it's a bad thing that happened that turns into a good thing?
I think so. I don't know that hockey is necessarily trailing society so much as it's mirroring society. And maybe it's a little bit behind, but I think there's been an assault on hockey culture in the last 3 weeks.
Go back to the Don Cherry
Go back to the Don Cherry thing, but there's some truth to it. I think if we all look in the mirror and say, look, in the last 20 years, have there been things involving hockey? And I think if you talk to Wayne Simmons, PK Subban, Anthony Duclair, every single visible minority that's been involved in hockey has been the target of some sort of racism. At some point. Right. I can tell you that myself. I've been the target of it. But you got to say, and I came into this industry in the early 2000s, it's a lot better. And it's trending in the right direction. But I think the best thing to come out of the Bill Peters thing is I feel like the vetting process for coaches in the National Hockey League is going to be a lot better. And I think the exhaustive interview process that the Calgary Flames and Brad Treliving did after this all came out, that's going to be what teams are doing before they hire a coach. And I think that's a good thing.
Well, yeah, I think the game, it's got to be a little more diverse, no question about it. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Ian, for showing up. Thank you for the Ottawa Senators, the Post Media's Ottawa Senators panel. Thank you.